忘却を苦しみから逃れる手段に使ってはならない。だが彼だけにはそれが許される。いや、許されるような気がする。もし神がいるのなら、それは彼に与えたものだ。救いなのだ。
The story of Tekkaman Blade is one of tragedy at every turn. Indeed, its plot is therefore one that, despite always wanting to, I will generally refuse to speak about. This is a constant contender for my all-time favourite anime, and as one would thus expect, I often find myself reflecting on it, wanting to rave about its shocking character arcs. Yet I always cut myself short, because what Tekkaman Blade is not, is popular. Given its immense emotional impact and its inclusion in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, I'd have expected it to self-propagate with ease, but it's ended up a criminally overlooked saga of sci-fi brilliance, too surprisingly obscure to ever be relevant in online discussion, yet at the same time too important of a series for me to be willing to casually spoil. But something that I'm also always a huge proponent of is creativity, or rather creative avenues of reflection, since I have my hesitations about calling review independent creation. If you're engaging with media and you don't just have a cheeky little blog going on, then what are you even doing? Now, if there's one thing I would hate, it would be to create the impression that I actually care enough to play to any audience except myself. But in spite of that, to make a show of support for the anime subreddit's writing contest is something I've regretted not doing sooner. I won't go too long or good, but nonetheless, I'll at least submit. And unfortunately, given the theme, there can be no other point of focus. For what story in this medium could possibly tell of a loss more deep, of a soul more tortured than Tekkaman Blade? The tragedy without reprieve. Unlike your Gundams and your Gunbusters, Tekkaman Blade is a very simple story. There are multiple threads of character conspiracy operating at every layer of the plot. Yes, but within that, there isn't a whole lot that one is required to unpack in the viewing experience. Ambiguous political tension? It is in there, I guess. Drama on the planetary scale, for sure. But that all takes a backseat to the story of Takaya Aiba. There's no political grandstanding, there's no deep message or complicated symbols. It's just a character-centric journey about a man pulled between his own hatred and the love of others. Can they outpace his suffering, or will he ultimately tumble into ruin? That's the kind of show we follow. The setting is quite well realised, but for the most part, all effort is dumped into the character growth. There isn't a whole lot of artistic trickery going on, so Tekkaman Blade's storytelling is flat, but in a way that makes it uniquely visceral, raw and human. At no point does D-Boy ever really adopt the fate of the world. Of course he wants to stave devastation as much as possible, but every action he takes has this tainted motivation of fulfilling his malign promise. To cast away his identity and become a tool of revenge that exists only to strike down the corruption that stole his family. The story christens itself in the suffering of one man, and all other plot devices are orbiting his central development. Episode 1 and the series at large is set in motion when D-Boy falls from orbit. This heavily startles the researchers who watched it unfold, both at the randomness of the event and at his remarkable feat of not exploding. They bring him in for a medical checkup and, surprise surprise, slamming into the ground at terminal velocity seems to do a number on the human brain. To begin the series with his memories would surely be too easy, so I suppose it's a standard sci-fi drama setup. But the thing is that D-Boy doesn't actually agree, because those memories aren't gone at all. Despite pleading amnesia, gaps seem to be forming in that front with every enemy Tekkaman they encountered. The Space Knights were listening in on communications to hear him acting familiar with Fritz inside the Tekkaman dagger armor, and he soon relays the information that Tekkaman Evil is his twin brother Shinya. But amnesia is a sensitive topic. There's no guarantee that his memory would have been impaired in a linear fashion, right? The answer to that doesn't really matter, because with the surprise return of his beloved younger sister, Chief Freeman finally steps up to confront him. Not D-Boy. Takaya Aiba never had amnesia at all. That was a lie. Was it a predatory fabrication? Freeman isn't sure, but by this point it had become impossible to ignore any longer that he was deceiving them from the start, pleading memory loss in order to avoid opening up to them. So why? He wants to believe that D-Boy is as much their ally as they are his. So what would possibly drive him to still keep that facade after all this time together? This is something that D-Boy tries his best to deflect even in this situation. But with his comrades facing him down, he's finally forced to reveal it all. The terrible history of the Aiba family and the blood on his father's last breath. Whether it was Takuya and Shinya's brotherly competitions or Miyuki then jumping into the fray, the Aiba were a very happy bunch. There was so much love to go around, in fact, that the siblings all served as navigation staff aboard the family spacecraft. Over a year prior to the start of the anime, they were out on an expedition near the region of Saturn, joking about how romantic it'd be for the eldest son to be wed in front of its ring. As they entered the planet's vicinity, they started detecting an unidentified signal, and after some heated discussions, decided it was their human duty to at least go and visually confirm what it was. Which, space. That decision is undoubtedly where the trouble begins, with the trouble they happened upon manifesting in the form of the dormant radar mothership. The family was torn on whether to push in further or not, but ultimately 3 of them departed for the derelict. The rest goes about as well as you'd expect. They're swallowed by the radom trees and crystallized into Tekkamen. It doesn't take long before the radom enter the spaceship to attack Miyuki and those in hypersleep either. Their father is rejected due to not meeting the tech system's qualifications, and in his last moment before his flesh falls to ruin, he sends Takuya off in an emergency shuttle, bidding him forget his name and past to instead become the blade which will destroy Shinya and Miyuki. The Aiba as they were are now dead men walking, and Takuya is no exception. The others can only look on in horror at the tale they'd just heard. This went far beyond anything they were expecting. A backstory so horrendous that they immediately regret forcing it out of him. Trying to keep that emotional barricade between them was D-Boy's way of protecting both himself and them. He's an incredibly flawed human being in the time the series dedicates him, and so this is his messy attempt at keeping the loss contained. However, with this now out in the open, the next phase of the story is ushered in. The falsities are removed, and everyone can finally begin to engage without lie. For the first time in Memory Shot, and even if it is sure to be only a temporary respite, D-Boy feels like he can connect with others from a real place again. A crushing weight is lifted off those big old shoulder pauldrons of his. But that won't last. Not in this story. It's not so kind. Some of his worst fears are realized when Tekkaman Blade, stunned by his radom-controlled brother exploiting the memory of their younger sister, accidentally exceeds the half-hour time limit to his transformation, and the invader instincts take over his mind. He comes very close to ending human civilization right then and there, as not even a reaction bomb to the face could make him so much as flinch. It's only through Millie putting her life on the line to confront him that D-Boy is able to return to his senses. She's the one person he had accidentally opened up to, due to the way she called to mind the time spent with his younger sister. Although she doesn't blame him, he can't get himself to accept such light forgiveness of what he had done. The suffering snowballs from there. He had come this close to killing the family stand-ins he was becoming so fond of, and this trauma entrenches itself deep. Gruesome images of him mutilating his friends plague his mind whenever he approaches Pegasus, causing him to become scared of turning into Tekkaman. The feeling of Millie's fragile throat was still disturbingly warm on his hands. His place in the group has been compromised, or at least that's how he feels. But more importantly, it separates him from his venomous self-definition. If he cannot hold on to his mission, then what is he? For what could he live if not revenge? The madness is the only thing keeping him sane, yet now even that seems to have been stolen from him. Reuniting with Miyuki had provided him a momentary relief. Yet it didn't take long for his unfortunate destiny to rear its head once more. A downright miraculous reunion is cut violently short when his sister reveals she was ejected as an incomplete Tekkaman, and her body was in the process of rapid tissue breakdown. She had maybe a week left to live, and that was only if they were lucky, which D-Boy traditionally has not been. She doesn't make it, brutally crucified by her brainwashed brethren. Then the same thing naturally happens to him too. He pays much less attention to himself, so it goes unnoticed for a while, but D-Boy's cell production is running awry with each transformation. By this point, they've conducted a lot more research on the aliens though, so they're able to make plans to fix him through the generation of an artificial right-arm womb. It's around this point that the existence of a more evolved Tekkaman form is acknowledged by both sides, and Freeman believes that will be the remedy. It's heartbreaking that Miyuki never got this chance, but at the very least, they will save Takaya. Tekkaman Blade isn't such a nice story. Disaster sits around every corner, making it highly doubtful things will go that way. After successfully surviving the Blaster Mode upgrade, it did look as though D-Boy was finally stabilizing, but no, it could never be that easy for him. Things appear fine on the surface, on the upswing even, until a seemingly intimate conversation with Aki where he tells her to call him Takaya turns into an alarming harbinger of things to come. They may have mitigated one problem, but the forced elevation of his Tekkaman genes only introduced another. D-Boy's body couldn't actually handle the blaster upgrade. He was rapidly losing his memory due to neuron breakdown, and as he continued to fight, it would only worsen, until his mind eventually snaps like an overtuned bowstring. After only the first time using the blaster form, he had already forgotten the foremost fact that they were calling him D-Boy for the last year. Like, nothing is sacred at this point. That goofy name that had become so key to the show's identity is thrown into contention with the self-destructing narrative design. This becomes the biggest Achilles heel in the series, paving the way for his eventual downfall. 6 episodes left, and a death sentence has been delivered, causing the remaining few to happen under the veil of a thick layer of despair from the Space Knights who are left watching him decline. It's not like the war can possibly be fought without him though. He refuses to let it be. So he fights on, having a piece of himself stolen away each time. Whether it's his nickname or the robot he's had to use to transform after the tech crystal shattered all the way back in the first Kur. Memories are mercilessly incinerated to fuel his shambling body, until it finally stands before the last battle. Life beats him down and beats him down and beats him down, without mercy, without remorse, without reprieve, repeatedly and repeatedly, and as he holds his dying brother in his arms, finally freed from the control of a creature so weak it's as if it was some sick joke all along. At long last, D-Boy breaks. Despite not wanting to say goodbye to his friends, despite clinging so desperately to his love for Aki, the anger and despair he feels in that moment overwhelm even the last embers of his mind, and he willingly discards everything. Loss consumes love. When they visited his family home one last time before the final battle, he broke down in tears and promised that even if all else is taken from him by the blaster transformation, his hatred is the one thing he'll never let go. This is the core of Tekkaman Blade's emotional experience. After everything he's put through, the happy ending is not waiting for him on the other side. It's a tragedy in motion. In his time with the Space Knights, he had come to treat them like a foster family. Millie obviously reminded him of his younger sister. Noel was like a brother. Honda was a father figure he greatly respected, and Aki was very much his lover by now. But when pushed to the very limit of sanity, the expected narrative is cut short. Life with friends is sacrificed for death with the family. This is retro sci-fi, and you know what? Sometimes the power of friendship isn't enough. They're ultimately forsaken for his biological ties. He cannot escape his cursed blood, so the only thing left to do is to blaze and burn out. With the chilling line, both D-Boy and Takuya Aiba just died here. I am Tekkaman Blade. He rejects all the growth he had gone through over the course of the series. His initial wariness forcefully shattered and a true camaraderie allowed to form, even so far as a hard-fought hope for the future with those he has come to love. And then erasing it all to revert to the beginning. He revokes his friendships, his feelings, his dreams, and returns to his original purpose as nothing more than a tool of hatred. A weapon with which to strike down the Radam. Aki desperately cries that she wants to see him one last time. Freeman's mask that had been unfeeling and flawless up to now finally cracks, and Millie simply prays that a miracle will save him. But none of that is enough to measure up to the rampant hate he feels for the Radam. Knowing that his 30 minutes of control are almost up, knowing that if he fights any longer, his memory loss will reach its final stage, Tekkaman Blade throws it all away and flies off to kill the last of kin, letting hope burn out in the final promise to his brothers. Cry as they might, it's too late for him. D-Boy and Takuya, and whatever motivations are contained within both of these names for the protagonist, have both metaphorically taken their own lives in a fit of despair, leaving behind only a fury sharpened to razor's edge. There is only a blade thirsting for the poisoned blood. Kill, he does, erupting in instinctual rage as the final Radam is vanquished within his scathing light. The heavens are aglow with the end of life and love, and the memory of a man tortured is cast to the ether. The series ends on a brief time skip, following the scattered Space Knights as they discuss how planet Earth is slowly beginning to recover from the Radam infection. It is here that our protagonist's last misfortune rears its head. He's alive, but nothing more than that. The severe brain damage from Tekkaman's final battle has stripped him of everything. His memories and his ego. Devoid of self and reduced to a vegetative state with Aki as his caretaker, he simply gazes out at the sunset and offers an empty smile. Tekkaman Blade, Takuya Aiba, and D-Boy are dead. The man they see here is not even a shell of his former self, but a mere effigy. It is here that Freeman delivers his final prayer, with his haunting words being the last sentence uttered before the credits roll. Forgetting must never be used as a way to escape suffering, but he alone shall be allowed to do so, or so it seems to me. If there is a God, then surely that is the one grace he's granted him. It's not even close to perfect. In fact, it's highly contestable whether it was even a better fate than death in the first place. This is not the reward he deserved for everything he endured. Caught somewhere along the spectrum of a hollow peace and bottomless melancholy, Aki embraces him softly, and the series ends. For better or worse, Takuya's struggle has come to an end in the only bleak way it ever could have. For the man who loved so deeply, and hated with a fire that couldn't be extinguished. In the question of overcoming loss, Tekkaman Blade does not offer an answer. A man is simply made to crumble beneath it. The love that Aki and the others have to offer ultimately is not enough to overwrite his legacy of suffering. He does not heal. He just hates and hates until he becomes physically and mentally incapable of hating any longer. Characters are unwritten and plot is reversed, and in the end, it's the incomplete nature of his development that makes it all so powerful. The most powerful story which anime will surely ever tell.